Hello and welcome to the Open Book channel, where I talk about everything and anything writerly very, very honestly. So, for someone who likes to talk about writing so much, I realized that I haven't talked much about my own writing on this channel. I throw up little ads sometimes to direct people to things that I've done, but I don't talk about the content itself all that often, which is pretty atypical for a writer-tuber, I suppose. Since I started this channel, I've been avoiding talking about my writing because I'm scared of what that may bring. Over the last couple years, there's been a big fallout with author-tubers and their communities as they've released their books, and people found that they didn't live up to expectations. There's a heavy and widely shared criticism in the bookish community for people that give advice on writing who don't always practice what they preach. Which, don't get me wrong, it's not like I'm not open to valid criticism. It's just that because I have content available to read online of mine that is older, I was worried people would find it and dismiss anything that I make in the future or any writerly content that I've made afterwards as valid if I drew too much attention to my older books. I didn't want them to define me, but I also didn't want to be someone that talked about writing all the time and had no writing to show for it. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. Many of you may be familiar with Jennie, a big voice in the authortube community, and that she went through something similar. She claims that she removed her first published book from sale because it was part of a series that she didn't intend to finish, and therefore it wasn't fair to readers to keep it up. But a lot of us who read her first book before it was taken down will know that it was heavily in her favor to remove it from circulation because people were holding it against her current success and ripping her apart for contradictions. Because, yeah, personally, I didn't think it was a very good story either. So I didn't want to hide my work away like I was ashamed of it, but I also didn't want to actively guide people to it as a representation of what I'm worth as a writer. I've hoped that the audience my book was meant for would find it on their own, and everyone that I've met on YouTube and was curious about my older work would go looking for it with a kinder nature than what befell Jenna, with an understanding that I've grown from my older writing. But it finally happened. My first published memoir has been found on Amazon and read and reviewed, and they gave it 5 stars, which is awesome. But that also means that the cat's out of the bag. It's been found through my YouTube. So now seems like as good a time as any to finally talk about it. I'd like to introduce you to Home Sweet Crack Shack. I released Home Sweet Crack Shack on Amazon in 2021, but I wrote it back in 2015. Hence the hesitation I mentioned earlier. I don't have specific dates, but it's now been well over half of a decade since I wrote HSCS, so it's really not reflective of not just my professionalism as a writer, but my style. I've leaned into prose so much since my first memoir that I don't know if I handed someone my oldest and my newest works, whether they'd read them and think it's even by the same person. I wrote Home Sweet Crack Shack during the tail end of my university experience. It was actually a magnum opus final project for my creative writing course. I don't remember what the parameters of the assignment were, whether it was a word count or a page count, but I was certainly the only student that chose to do a memoir on their trauma. In some ways, I really regret that. Choosing to write on something so personal made it really difficult for my peers to feel like they could comment on it and give me constructive criticism, which was the whole point of the class. Even the teacher was just too nice, I think. It's not that I know Home Sweet Crack Shack has its flaws now, all these years later. I knew it had flaws back then, too. I was just too close to it to see them, and no one was willing to point them out. Between my class and teacher and the 2 beta readers that I enlisted, I was kind of stuck when it came to getting eyes on my work. Home Sweet Crack Shack was just too intimate of a story, I guess. People read it, and based on the tone of it, felt like I was too fragile to handle feedback. Which, fair. I spent years toiling over Home Sweet Crack Shack, tweaking a sentence here and correcting a tense there, but the story could only ever be what it was. It's nonfiction. I can't add or change it, really, I can just rewrite it. So, after dozens of fruitless revisions, I decided to release it on Wattpad. If I had to guess, I'd say that was 2017? I know Wattpad is kind of a consolation release option for a lot of writers who spent time on writing something, but aren't proud enough to go through the full process of selling it as an ebook on Amazon. But I wanted it on Wattpad at the start. I thought that Wattpad was the best shot for Home Sweet Crack Shack to find the demographic that it was meant for. The tone of writing in it is quite young adult, with excessive internal dialogue. But the subject matter is new adult, and I hoped that in putting it on Wattpad, I could find young, impressionable people like me, how I was when I went through the events of Home Sweet Crack Shack in real life, and to help prepare them for what comes next. Entering college and the world being a lot shittier outside your hometown than you expected. The only reason I moved Home Sweet Crack Shack off of Wattpad was because I was going to be releasing my future memoirs on Amazon, and I thought readers might like to read HSCS 2 for that extra context. Home Sweet Crack Shack can be read as a one-off, but it is also a piece of the larger story of the Bleeding Heart series, which explores my first relationship. Reading Home Sweet Crack Shack in relationship to Strangling Heartstrings, for example, it becomes more apparent just how me and my partner became so codependent, how heavily we had to rely on each other as young adults, and were in the steady process of cutting ourselves off from everyone else in our lives since we'd moved out to college as teenagers. So that's why all those years later, I uploaded Home Sweet Crack Shack to Amazon. I decided something recently that made me feel better about having HSCS available on Amazon, and that's my pen name. This name that it's under, Slady Valheim. Now that I've released the Bleeding Heart series and moved on to founding Acidic Ink Publishing, I've been able to take a step back and see myself as others see me, as an author. I have a drive to write fiction and nonfiction almost equally. So, on top of being worried that Home Sweet Crack Shack's quality might come back to haunt me, I worried that I would confuse and lose future readers because it's such a different genre and vibe from what I do when I'm writing fiction. So, I won't write fiction. Not under this pen name anyway, never again. Slady Valheim is a exclusively nonfiction, prose-centric pen name. That way, I guess, even if people read Home Sweet Crack Shack instead of my newer work, they will at least be able to look at my library of work and see it for what it is. My first memoir, my hopefully worst memoir, and more of a stepping stone for my career as a nonfiction writer than a definitive work. My first reviewer was definitely able to see it as that, and I hope that any of you that read Home Sweet Crack Shack in the future do too. If you want to read about the terrible time I had my first year in university, living in an apartment under a major drug dealer, there will be a link to it on Amazon in the description below. You can also get a free download when you become a supporter on the Open Books Ko-fi, which I'd say is an even sweeter deal. So if you're actually interested, I'd suggest checking that link out instead. Wink wink. As always, thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to support me and this channel, you can find a link to the Ko-fi, like I said earlier, in the description below. An extra special thank you to the Open Book supporters. You are the best, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!